Husband. He does it brilliantly. He can do all the voices.
Something unusual is unfolding behind palace walls. No speeches were made, no arguments were seen, yet quietly power may have shifted. Sources say the palace has confirmed subtle changes that left Catherine's growing authority weakened, not by force but by silence and careful timing. At the center stands Camilla, experienced, patient, and deeply familiar with how influence truly works. This is not a loud royal clash, but a quiet one, where small decisions speak loudly. Nothing here feels accidental, and every pause seems deliberate. So what happened, and why now? The house that watches. Every morning before the sun touches the towers of Buckingham Palace, something quiet begins to happen. It is not loud, it is not rushed, but be careful. Very, very careful. The palace wakes up like a giant that has been sleeping for 1,000 years. Clocks begin to tick in rooms where no one has entered yet. Long hallways stretch out in silence. Footsteps are soft on the carpet. Doors open and close without a sound. People move through the building like shadows, carrying papers, arranging flowers, checking lists that never seem to end. This is not a home where you shout across the kitchen for breakfast. This is not a place where someone runs down the stairs in their pajamas. Everything here has a rule. Everything has a place. And everyone knows exactly where they belong. The palace does not speak. It never has. It does not need to. Instead, it signals. It tells you things without words. It shows you where you stand by where you sit at dinner. It tells you how important you are by who walks into the room first. It whispers secrets through the order of names on a document or the size of a photograph in a frame. People who work in the palace understand this language. They have learned it over years, sometimes over lifetimes. They know that a slight nod means yes, a pause means no. A change in schedule means something has shifted. A canceled appearance means someone is not pleased. There are no arguments here, not the kind you would see in a regular house. No one slams doors, no one raises their voice. But things still happen. Decisions are still made. And sometimes, without anyone saying a single word, someone loses power while someone else quietly gains it. The palace has layers. Imagine a cake with many floors. At the very top sits the king. Below him are others. Each one has a title. Each one has a role. But not all roles are equal. Some people have more influence than others, even if their titles sound similar. There is a queen consort. She has been close to the king for many years, long before he wore the crown. She knows the palace like she knows her own breath. She understands which doors to open and which to leave closed. She has walked these halls when others were not watching. She has learned patience. She has learned timing. She knows how to move through the palace like water, filling spaces without making noise. Then there is a Princess of Wales. She is younger. She is watched by millions. Her face is on magazines and screens around the world. People love her. They cheer for her. They want to see her. And one day, many years from now, she will stand where the queen consort stands now. She will rise higher. This is not a secret. Everyone knows this. The palace knows this. But the future does not mean the present. And in the present, there are rules about who holds what kind of power. The palace does not like change. It moves slowly like a mountain. It has seen kings and queens come and go. It has watched wars and weddings and funerals. It does not panic. It does not rush. It simply waits. And while it waits, it protects itself. It protects its traditions. It protects the way things have always been. When someone enters a room, the order matters. Who steps in first is not random. It is planned. It is decided long before the door opens. Who speaks first at an event is chosen carefully. Who stands closest to the king is arranged with precision. These are not accidents. These are signals. And if one day someone who usually enters second suddenly enters first, people notice. If someone who always speaks is suddenly silent, people wonder. The palace does not explain these changes. It simply lets them happen. And those who understand the language know exactly what has occurred. There are no loud battles here. There are no shouting matches in the corridors. But there are battles, quiet ones. Battles fought with schedules and seating charts. Battles fought with which events are important and which are not. Battles fought with who gets noticed and who does not. Power in the palace is not always about a crown. Sometimes it is about influence. about whispers, about being close to the person who makes decisions, about shaping what that person hears and sees. And when two people want influence over the same space, over the same future, over the same attention, something has to give. But it will not give out loudly. It will not give drama that the world can see. It will give the way the palace always works, quietly, carefully, through signals that only those inside truly understand. The morning routine continues. The clocks keep ticking. The aides keep moving. The flowers are arranged perfectly. And somewhere in the carefully ordered rooms, decisions are being made without anyone speaking them aloud. The palace watches, it always does, and it remembers everything. Keep watching to know what happens next. The woman who learned to lead without shouting. Catherine did not arrive at the palace with a crown. She did not grow up in castles or learn royal protocol from birth. She came from a regular family, a family that celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes, a family that went on normal vacations, a family where you could laugh loudly at the dinner table without worrying about who was watching. But when she married into the royal family, everything changed, not just for her, but for everyone around her, because Catherine understood something important from the very beginning. She understood that respect is not given, it is earned, and earning it takes time. In the early years, she watched more than she spoke. She observed how things worked. She noticed who made decisions and how those decisions traveled through the palace. She paid attention to the small details. Which events mattered most? Which appearances carried weight? Which moments required her to be present, and which moments required her to step back? She made mistakes, everyone does, but she learned from them quickly. She never made the same mistake twice. And slowly, very slowly, people began to notice that Catherine was not just showing up. She was preparing. She was thinking ahead. She was becoming someone the palace could depend on. Her calendar filled up year after year. More visits, more speeches, more responsibilities. But she did not complain. She did not ask for lighter days or easier tasks. Instead, she approached each duty with the same careful attention. She met with charity workers and listened to their concerns. She visited hospitals and remembered the names of sick children. She attended ceremonies and stood for hours without fidgeting or looking tired. The palace staff began to see her differently. At first, they saw her as the young woman who married the prince. Then they saw her as the mother of future heirs. But eventually, they saw her as something more. They saw her as someone who understood the work, someone who took the role seriously, someone who was building something that would last. Behind closed doors, Catherine was doing even more. She was not just appearing at events and waving at crowds. She was asking questions. She was learning about the causes she supported. She was building relationships with people who ran organizations and programs. She was reading reports. She was sitting in meetings. She was making decisions about which projects to support and which ones to set aside. Her team grew. The people who worked with her became loyal not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be. They saw how hard she worked. They saw how much she cared. They saw that she was not using her position for attention. She was using it to make things better. And the public loved her, not in a loud, chaotic way, but in a steady, deep way. They trusted her. When she spoke about children, they believed she meant it. When she spoke about mental health, they knew she had thought about it carefully. When she appeared at an event, they felt proud to see her there. But Catherine's authority was not about popularity. It was about something deeper. It was about the way institutions began to respond to her. When she supported a cause, funding appeared. When she championed an idea, organizations listened. When she expressed interest in a topic, experts wanted to work with her. Inside the palace, her influence grew in ways the public could not see. Decisions about her schedule were made with more care. Her opinions on royal matters were sought more often. Her voice in conversations about the family's future carried more weight. She was no longer just the wife of the future king. She was becoming a leader in her own right. Her style was quiet. She did not demand attention. She did not push herself forward. She did not try to outshine anyone. But her presence was impossible to ignore. When she entered the room, people straightened up. When she asked a question, people gave thoughtful answers. When she expressed concern, people took it seriously. She had learned the palace language, the one without words, the one that speaks through timing and placement and gesture. She understood that showing up consistently mattered more than showing up dramatically. She knew that keeping promises built trust. She knew that staying calm under pressure showed strength. Her role expanded naturally. More patronages, more responsibilities, more events where her presence was not just appreciated but needed. She became the face of important initiatives. She represented the family at significant moments. She stood beside her husband not as someone following him, but as someone walking with him. The future was always there, hanging in the air like morning mist. One day, many years from now, Catherine would be queen. Everyone knew this. The palace knew this. The country knew this. And Catherine knew this. But she was not waiting for that day. She was preparing for it. Every appearance was practice. Every speech was training. Every responsibility was a lesson. She was building the experience she would need. She was developing the confidence required. She was earning the respect that could not simply be handed to her. Her children watched her. They saw their mother working. They saw her balancing duty with kindness. They saw her managing a schedule that would exhaust most people while still making time to read them bedtime stories. They were learning what it meant to serve just by watching her live her life. The palace itself seemed to adjust around her. Schedules were built with her input. Events were planned with her strengths in mind. Traditions were adapted to include her vision. She was not changing everything. She was not tearing down walls, but she was gently shaping the space around her to fit the kind of leader she was becoming. And that authority, quiet as it was, mattered enormously. Because in a place like the palace, where power is layered and complicated, where futures are decided by small gestures and careful positioning, having real authority means having real influence. It means having a say in what happens next. It means being someone others must consider, must consult, must respect. Catherine had built that, not through birthright, not through the title alone, but through years of patient, careful, consistent work. She had earned her place, she had earned her voice, she had earned the right to be heard, and nothing about that was accidental. Stay with us. The queen who survived by staying quiet. Camilla did not become queen consort by accident. She did not stumble into the role or win it through luck. She earned it through something much harder. She earned it by surviving. For decades, Camilla lived under a spotlight that burned. The public did not like her at first. Newspapers wrote cruel things about her. People compared her to someone they had loved deeply, someone whose memory still felt precious and painful. Camilla became a symbol of everything that had gone wrong and a story the world had adored. But she did not run away. She did not hide. She stayed. And slowly, year by year, she learned how to exist in a world that did not want her there. She learned that shouting does not win arguments in the palace. She learned that defending yourself loudly only makes things worse. She learned that the only way forward was through patience, through small steps, through proving yourself quietly until people stopped questioning your right to be there. She learned power the hard way. Camilla understood something that takes most people a lifetime to learn. She understood that real power is not always loud. It is not always visible. Sometimes the most powerful people in a room are not the ones speaking. They are the ones listening, the ones who know exactly when to offer advice and when to stay silent, the ones who understand that being close to the person making decisions is more valuable than making the decisions yourself. She had been beside the king for years before he wore the crown. She knew him before the weight of duty settled fully on his shoulders. She knew his frustrations, his worries, his hopes. She had been there through difficult times when others were not, and that history mattered. That closeness gave her something no title could provide. It was given to her. When the king finally became king, Camilla became queen consort. The title was hers, but titles only mean what people allow them to mean. Camilla knew this better than anyone. She had watched how the palace worked for decades. She had seen people with grand titles have very little power. She had seen people with smaller titles shape everything that happened. She was careful, always careful. She understood protocol better than almost anyone. She knew where to stand in photographs. She knew which events required her presence and which events belonged to others. She knew how to move through the palace without creating friction. She had learned to read the signals, the tiny shifts in language and behavior that told her when things were changing, and things were always changing. The palace has a rhythm. Power flows like water, always moving, always shifting. What matters today might not matter tomorrow. Who is important now might not be important next year. Camilla understood this rhythm. She had lived through enough shifts to know that nothing stays the same forever. But she also understood something else. She understood that her position, while important, was temporary in a specific way. She was queen consort, yes, but she would never be more than that. Her role would not grow, it would not expand. She had reached the highest point she could reach. Catherine, on the other hand, had not. This was not personal. This was simply a fact. Catherine would one day become queen in a way Camilla never would. Catherine's influence would continue to grow. Her role would expand. Her authority would deepen, and there was nothing anyone could do to change that. Camilla was not foolish. She could see what was happening. She could see Catherine becoming more confident, more visible, more respected. She could see the way people responded to Catherine, the way organizations wanted to work with her, the way the public trusted her, the way the palace itself seemed to be adjusting around her. And perhaps, just perhaps, this felt uncomfortable. Not because Camilla disliked Catherine, not because she wanted to hurt her, but because in a world where power is limited and carefully distributed, watching someone else's power grow can feel like watching your own power shrink. Camilla had worked too hard to get where she was. She had survived too much. She had endured years of criticism and doubt. She had proven herself over and over again. And now, finally, she had the title and the position she had waited for. She was not about to let it feel smaller than it should. But what could she do? She could not fight Catherine openly. That would be foolish. It would break every rule the palace lives by. It would make her look threatened, insecure, petty. And Camilla was none of those things. She was strategic. She was experienced. She knew better than to engage in battles that could be seen. Instead, she would do what she had always done. She would work quietly. She would use the tools available to her. She would use her closeness to the king. She would use her understanding of protocol. She would use her knowledge of how the palace operates. She would make small adjustments, tiny shifts that most people would not even notice. She would not stop Catherine from doing her work. She would not block her appearances or cancel her events. That would be too obvious. Instead, she might ensure that certain decisions were made in certain ways. She might shape conversations before they happened. She might influence which projects received attention and which did not. She might subtly remind people that she was queen consort now and that rank still mattered. These would not be dramatic moves. They would be careful ones, the kind that could never be proven, the kind that left no evidence, the kind that, if questioned, could be explained away as simple protocol or mere coincidence. Camilla had learned long ago that survival in the palace requires subtlety. It requires understanding that power is not about what you say in public. It is about what you whisper in private. It is about who listens to you when doors are closed. It is about being the person someone trusts most when they need advice. And Camilla was that person for the king. She had earned that position through years of loyalty and patience. She had stood beside him when others walked away. She had supported him when he needed it most. That bond was real. That trust was deep. And it gave her something no protocol could override. It gave her his ear. So when decisions needed to be made, she would be there. When questions needed to be answered, she would offer her thoughts. When the future was being shaped, she would have a voice in shaping it. Not loudly, not obviously, but undeniably, because Camilla had learned power the hard way, and she was not about to forget those lessons now. When power moves like shadows at sunset. Sometimes change happens without anyone declaring it. Doors that once opened easily become harder to push through. Invitations that once arrived regularly begin to skip weeks. Schedules that once aligned suddenly conflict. And no one points to a single moment when everything shifted, yet everyone inside the palace walls feels the difference. It began with small things. Meetings about future plans that Catherine had attended regularly became less frequent on her calendar. Not every meeting, just some. The important ones where long-term decisions got shaped, where priorities for the coming year got discussed, where resources got allocated to projects and causes. Staff members noticed when her chair sat empty at tables where she had previously been present. When questions arose about these absences, answers came back polite and reasonable. Scheduling conflicts, overlapping commitments, other obligations that required her attention elsewhere. Every explanation made sense on its own, but together they created a pattern. Catherine found herself informed of decisions after they had been made, rather than being part of the conversation while they were still forming. Events provided another space where shifts became visible to those watching carefully. The royal calendar fills with engagements throughout the year. Some matter more than others. Some carry symbolic weight. Some offer visibility to whoever attends. Quietly, without announcement, certain high-profile opportunities began flowing in different directions. Not all of them, but enough that the change registered. Observers noted that events Catherine might have naturally attended were instead assigned elsewhere. A major diplomatic function, an important charity gala, a ceremony with significant historical meaning. Each time the explanation seemed logical. Someone else had a connection to the cause. Another member of the family had availability. The schedule required different arrangements. But the cumulative effect meant Catherine appeared less frequently at the moments that mattered most. Behind closed doors, something else was happening. Catherine had been developing greater autonomy in her work, choosing which causes to champion, shaping how her projects unfolded, making decisions about her public role with increasing independence. This autonomy had grown naturally as her confidence and experience increased. But gradually, that independence seemed to require more approvals, more consultations, more layers of oversight. Staff who worked closely with Catherine noticed the change. Plans that once moved forward smoothly now needed additional sign-offs. Ideas that would have been implemented quickly now required more meetings and more input from others. It appeared that decisions about Catherine's schedule and priorities were being made with more voices at the table, and not all those voices belonged to people working directly for her. The palace operates through coordination. Different royal households must work together so schedules do not conflict and messages stay consistent. This need for coordination is real and necessary. But coordination can also become control when taken too far. What begins as making sure everyone stays informed can shift into needing permission for things that once required none. Catherine found herself navigating more checkpoints, more requests for advance notice about her plans, more suggestions that perhaps a different approach might work better, more gentle redirections toward projects that aligned with what others thought appropriate rather than what she felt most passionate about. None of these interventions came with sharp edges or harsh words. They arrived wrapped in helpfulness and concern for coordination. Access matters in any organization, but especially in a palace. Who gets time with the king shapes what he hears and therefore what he decides. Who sits in briefings receives information that guides their actions. Who participates in planning sessions influences what the family prioritizes. Access had once flowed relatively freely to Catherine as her role expanded. Now it seemed to require more scheduling, more formal requests, more waiting. She still attended important events. She still fulfilled her duties. She still appeared publicly and carried out her responsibilities. Nothing stopped completely, but the ease had changed. The flow had altered. Where she once felt her authority settling in naturally, she now felt more obstacles, more friction, more need to navigate around barriers that had not existed before. Staff members talked quietly among themselves. They noticed when Catherine's input on family matters was sought less frequently. They observed when her preferences seemed to carry less weight in final decisions. They saw when projects she cared about received less support or moved forward more slowly than expected. These were not dramatic changes. They were small adjustments in how the system functioned. But small adjustments, accumulated over time, create significant shifts. It appeared that someone, somewhere in the palace structure, had decided that Catherine's growing authority needed management. Not elimination, not confrontation, just gentle containment. A pulling back from the trajectory she had been on. A reminder perhaps that while she was important, she was not yet central. That her time would come, but that time was not now. The brilliance of this approach, if it was indeed deliberate, lay in its deniability. No one could point to a single act of undermining. No document spelled out a plan to diminish Catherine's role. No meeting minutes recorded decisions to limit her authority. Everything that happened had reasonable explanations. Everything could be defended as necessary coordination or appropriate oversight. But impact does not require announcement. Power can shift without speeches or ceremonies. Authority can be redirected through 1,000 small decisions that individually seem innocent, but collectively create a new reality. And those living through such changes feel them deeply, even when they cannot point to proof that would convince an outsider. The palace continued its daily rhythms. Clocks ticked, staff moved through hallways, Events unfolded on schedule. Everything looked proper and correct from the outside. But inside, those paying attention felt the change. They noticed the quiet redistribution of influence. They recognized that something had shifted in how authority flowed through the institution, and they wondered what it meant for the future. The language of what goes unsaid. The palace has its own way of telling the truth. It does not hold press conferences to explain internal dynamics. It does not issue statements about who holds power or whose influence has grown or shrunk. Instead, it lets patterns speak. It allows repetition to confirm what words never will. It uses silence like a stamp of approval on whatever version of reality settles into place. When rumors begin circulating about changes within the royal family, the palace faces a choice. It can issue clarifications. It can correct misunderstandings. It can push back against narratives that do not match reality. Or it can do nothing. And often doing nothing tells the most honest story. Senior aides understand this language fluently. They know that when the palace wants to kill a false story, it acts quickly. A source speaks to a trusted journalist. A correction appears in print. A clarification gets whispered to the right people who then spread accurate information through channels the public never sees. The palace has tools to shape narratives when it chooses to use them. But when those tools stay unused, when corrections never come, when clarifications remain absent, this silence carries meaning. It suggests that the story circulating, however uncomfortable, contains enough truth that denial would create bigger problems than acceptance. The palace would rather let people wonder than commit to a lie it might need to defend later. In Catherine's case, observers began noticing patterns that suggested her role had shifted. These observations spread through conversations among people who watch royal dynamics closely. Some wrote about what they noticed. Others discussed it privately. The patterns were subtle but consistent enough that people who understood palace operations could see them clearly. The palace did not rush to correct these perceptions. No aide called a journalist to say that Catherine's authority remained unchanged. No source insisted that her access and autonomy were exactly as they had been. No statement emerged to clarify that any perceived changes were merely temporary adjustments or misunderstandings. The silence stretched on, week after week, month after month. This absence of correction becomes its own form of confirmation. When something false threatens the reputation or standing of someone the palace values highly, protection comes quickly. Staff mobilize. Messages get coordinated. The institutional machinery moves to shield and defend. But when that machinery stays still, when no defense materializes, it suggests that what people are noticing is close enough to the truth that fighting it would be futile or revealing. Senior aides also communicate through what they allow to continue. If Catherine's schedule remained altered, if her access to certain meetings stayed restricted, if her autonomy continued requiring more oversight, these arrangements could have been reversed at any time. The palace could have restored previous patterns. It could have signaled through actions that any changes were temporary responses to specific circumstances rather than new, permanent arrangements. But the patterns persisted. Weeks became months. The new normal settled in and stayed settled. Staff grew accustomed to the altered flow of authority. Systems adjusted to the new hierarchy. What began as noticeable change became simply how things were. And this continuation, this lack of reversal, confirmed that the changes were not accidents or misunderstandings, but rather intentional adjustments to how the institution functioned. The palace also uses clarity as a tool. When something matters deeply to the institution, when a position or principle needs defending, the palace becomes remarkably clear. It finds ways to communicate its stance without ambiguity, through seating arrangements at events, through who receives which honors and when, through patterns of presence and absence that anyone paying attention can read. Clarity comes when the palace wants it. So when clarity does not come, when situations remain murky and open to interpretation, this murkiness itself communicates something. It suggests the palace prefers ambiguity, that having people wonder and speculate serves the institution better than providing definitive answers, that maintaining flexibility matters more than establishing clear truth. This approach protects everyone involved. Camilla never needs to be accused of anything specific, because nothing specific ever gets confirmed. Catherine never needs to publicly acknowledge any loss of authority because the palace never officially recognizes that authority shifted. The system continues functioning smoothly on the surface while underneath, everyone involved understands the new reality, even though no one names it aloud. Staff members who work within the palace learn to read these unspoken confirmations. They understand that repetition equals validation. If an arrangement persists month after month without correction or reversal, it has been approved at some level, even if no memo spelled it out. If a pattern of behavior continues without intervention, it represents institutional will, even if no meeting formally decided it. The absence of denial functions as powerful as any confirmation. When stories about royal dynamics go unchallenged, when perceptions about power shifts remain unaddressed, when patterns that favor one interpretation over another stay intact, the palace has effectively confirmed what it refuses to state. Not through words, but through the more reliable language of sustained behavior. Journalists who cover the palace understand this dynamic. They know that certain stories will never receive official confirmation, but can still be treated as factually solid because the palace's response or lack of response validates them. When palace sources could easily kill a story but choose not to, experienced observers understand what that choice means. This system serves the institution well. It allows adjustments to hierarchy and authority without public drama. It permits the palace to manage internal dynamics without airing conflicts that would damage everyone involved. It maintains the appearance of unity and cooperation while reality underneath grows more complicated. But for those living inside this system, the silence can feel heavy. Catherine could see the patterns as clearly as anyone else. She could feel the difference in how her authority functioned. She could notice the absence of support when perceptions about her diminished role went unchallenged. And she had to navigate this reality knowing that no one would ever officially confirm what she experienced, even as that experience shaped her daily life. The palace continued operating as it always had. Events proceeded on schedule. Duties got fulfilled. Everything appeared proper and correct. But beneath that smooth surface, truth lived in patterns rather than statements, in consistency rather than clarity, in what the palace allowed to persist rather than what it chose to declare. And that truth, confirmed through silence, spoke louder than any words could have. The story that time will finish writing. In a palace where portraits hang from centuries past and traditions stretch back through generations, today is only a small piece of a much longer story. What happens this year or next matters less than what patterns emerge over decades. Power in this world does not move quickly. It flows like a river carving through stone, steady and patient and impossible to rush. Catherine's experience, whatever its details, represents one chapter in a book still being written. Her authority may have shifted in recent years, but years are brief measurements in royal time. The monarchy thinks in reigns and generations. What feels significant now might appear as barely a footnote when historians look back from a distance of 50 or 100 years. This perspective does not erase what happened. It does not make any undermining less real or its effects less painful for those who lived through it. But it does place events in context. Catherine is young by royal standards. Her future stretches far ahead. The position she will eventually hold remains unchanged by whatever adjustments occurred in how she functions today. One day, not determined yet but certain to come, she will be queen. And when that day arrives, the authority that matters most will be hers by right, not by negotiation. Camilla understands this reality as clearly as anyone. Her position as queen consort, however hard-won and carefully protected, exists in the present tense. It does not extend indefinitely into the future. She holds influence now because she stands beside the king now, but monarchy moves forward through bloodlines, not through current arrangements. Her time at the center of power has limits built into the structure of the institution itself. This does not diminish what Camilla achieved or the influence she currently wields, but it places that influence in perspective. She can shape today and perhaps tomorrow. She can affect decisions and arrangements for as long as circumstances remain as they are. But she cannot alter the fundamental architecture of succession. She cannot change who comes next or what authority that person will eventually hold. The palace operates knowing these truths. Every adjustment made today exists within the understanding that tomorrow brings different configurations of power. Staff members who shifted their attention or loyalty in response to current dynamics will need to shift again when circumstances change. The same system that allowed authority to be redirected will allow it to be restored when the time comes. Catherine likely understands this too. Whatever frustrations or limitations she faced, she could see the longer arc. She could recognize that patience in this world often proves more valuable than fighting battles that time will resolve on its own. She could choose to wait, to continue building her capabilities and relationships, to prepare for a future role that no amount of current maneuvering can prevent her from eventually holding. This kind of patience requires strength. It means absorbing setbacks without retaliation. It means watching influence flow away from you without fighting to immediately reclaim it. It means trusting that the future remains yours even when the present feels controlled by others. Not everyone possesses this kind of patience, but those who succeed in royal life over the long term often do. The monarchy itself benefits from this long perspective. Conflicts that might tear apart other institutions become manageable when everyone involved knows that today's arrangements are temporary, that power will shift again, that those who hold authority now will eventually step back while others step forward. This knowledge encourages restraint. It discourages the kind of permanent warfare that destroys relationships and institutions. But this same long view can also enable behavior that looks toward immediate advantage rather than lasting harmony. If someone knows their time at the center is limited, they might choose to maximize their influence while they have it, even if doing so creates tension or resentment. They might decide that shaping the present matters more than preserving relationships for a future they will not dominate. The knowledge that power is temporary can inspire either careful stewardship or aggressive protection of current position. The difference between these approaches lies in how people calculate their legacy. Some measure success by how much they controlled while they had power. Others measure it by what they built that lasted beyond their own prominence. Some focus on winning today's battles. Others focus on being remembered well by history. The palace has seen both types throughout its long existence. Catherine's response to whatever she experienced will shape how she is remembered. If she maintained dignity and patience through difficulty, that strength becomes part of her story. If she continued building her capabilities and relationships even when authority felt constrained, that resilience defines her character. The challenges themselves, assuming they occurred, might fade from memory while how she handled them becomes the lasting narrative. Camilla's legacy will also be shaped by choices made during her time of influence, whether she used her position to strengthen the institution or primarily to protect her own standing, whether she helped prepare the next generation or created obstacles for them, whether she understood her role as temporary stewardship or as territory to be held as long as possible. History judges not just what people accomplished, but how they accomplished it and what they left behind. The palace itself continues regardless of these individual stories. It survived conflicts far more dramatic than quiet power struggles between capable women. It endured scandals and crises that threatened its very existence. It adapted to changing times while maintaining core traditions. Two women navigating complicated dynamics within its walls, however tense or difficult for them personally, represents a small challenge for an institution measured in centuries. But the people living inside these walls do not have the luxury of historical distance. They experience each day in real time with real emotions and real consequences. What historians might someday describe as a brief period of adjustment feels to them like ongoing struggle. The long view provides comfort, but it does not erase present pain or frustration. Questions remain because this story is not finished. Will the patterns that emerged in recent years continue or reverse? Will relationships damaged by tension find repair or calcify into permanent distance? Will Catherine's eventual authority be strengthened by what she learned through difficulty, or weakened by resentments that never healed? Will Camilla's use of her influence be remembered as wise guidance or overreach? Time will answer these questions, but time moves slowly in the palace. What we know for certain is that authority in this world is never truly lost, only delayed. That influence shifts but rarely disappears completely. That today's arrangement gives way to tomorrow's. The palace has its rhythms and patterns that outlast any individual's attempts to control them. The story continues in corridors and meeting rooms far from public view, in decisions made and unmade, in relationships that evolve through cooperation or competition, in the daily reality of people holding power and those waiting to inherit it. The final chapter remains unwritten because in royal life endings are rare. One reign flows into the next, one generation makes way for another, and the palace, ancient and patient, simply continues, watching, adapting, and preparing quietly for the moment when history shifts once again. As quiet tensions ripple through the palace, the choices made behind closed doors may shape the monarchy's future for years to come. Was this moment a careful act of preservation, or a silent struggle for control finally coming into view? In a world where tradition speaks louder than truth, even the smallest shift can change everything. What unfolds next may redefine authority, loyalty, and legacy itself. If you found this story revealing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again as we uncover the hidden forces shaping history's most powerful lives.